Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today is December 8th. Tonight, we will be discussing the financial investigation by the Rehmann Group. Tonight, we have Mark Kettner with us, and I will have him begin his presentation.
Very good. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I will take as little or as much time as you want discussing what we can out of this. Denise, did everybody get, the board members get a copy of the status report?
Yes, they did. I did email it to everybody.
Okay, so I certainly don't want to read it verbatim, and I won't. But let me start with the first three paragraphs that are there. A bit of a review of how things are gone. I would imagine for a number of you, especially if you've been around, you know, as this thing was percolating and approved, didn't get to where we thought it would get to. Besides this thing of a pandemic going on, there was just a wide array of whatever you want to call it, roadblocks, hurdles, forks in the road, changes, inactivity, just all kinds of things. And so boiling past that, it really was in March, like March 16th, that now Mayor Bazzi reached out to me and said, well, how's the investigation going? And I said, it's not. I haven't gotten, much of anything to speak of. And that includes kind of a linchpin to be able to do any kind of financial kind of work is having the trial balance. What's in the books? I could go and find audit reports on the state websites, but that is highly summarized information. And for the kind of questions and topics of issue that so many of you on the council at the time, we were trying to find out what everybody's issues were, you really needed that. So at that point, Mayor Bazzi reached out to the auditors, and we were using the auditors, again, just by review, because they had old ones readily available in their work paper files, where getting it from the city was going to be a challenge. And that challenge only grew as positions turned over and, having the people that actually knew how to go back and pull those. Current is one thing, years past is another. So at any rate, we got that. And the number one topic that seemingly, and we've already communicated this, was the PEG fees. All right. Could the PEG fees be spent for operating costs, including personnel, wages, salaries, benefits, whatever. So in the status report, it refers to a separate draft report, which had been prepared and submitted. And I just got to be honest, it was kind of weird stuff, because when this whole process started, Mayor Bazzi was Councilman Bazzi. And, so things evolved and he became mayor, and he's the one that kind of reached back out and got us the information. So I did the draft report, sent it on to him. And then, not that there was anything that I think is earth-shattering is not even the right word, that something that's really of concern, it didn't contain that. But I think just with the, call it the political nature of things, he wanted to wait on that until the primaries were done in August. And so, not wanting to be in the middle of whatever was going on, I said, fine. And not only didn't go further with the PEG report, but didn't go further with anything else. Mayor can speak to that further. That's just my paraphrasing of that. So when we go to that separate report, it's 3 pages long and was accompanied by some supporting schedules. It basically got 16 years worth of data, either from audit reports from Councilman Muscat, had some handwritten notes that I was able to tie out, getting expenses, getting some information from the most recent 8 years out of the 16 from the auditors as far as.
Okay, Councilman Baydoun, point of order. Thank you. Go ahead.
I got the 8 years of if you will, the detail had the trial balances for those 8 years, had audit reports going back another 8 years for a total of 16. So, I did a little bit of estimating based upon, that history, if you will. And so it shows very clearly that you spent most of the money on, I'm just trying to find my little summary of that. You spent almost out of $2.26 million received in that 16-year period. You spent nearly $700,000 on wages, another $100,000 on taxes and benefits, $300,000 on newsletters, $130,000 on phones, $166,000 on capital outlay, and then roughly $68,000 on other. I have no idea what other is because I didn't have the level of information made available to us to do that. So it becomes right back to, it just kind of proves out, number one, that the central question of, can the PEG monies be used for operating costs? There's a letter, City Council had put together, a very long letter, and I refer in there talking around the matter because, quite frankly, there is nothing in either that letter, the references, the regulations, federal or state, that I found that says specifically, can you or can you not use the PEG monies for operating costs, particularly personnel costs. Having dealt with federal regulations in a financial context for a very long time, and it's kind of the way American law is, right? If it's not prohibited, then it's allowed. All right. So using that logic, and also as I wrote into that report, just saying, you can't expect that somebody and take a small, medium local government is going to have the personnel at its ready disposal that knows how to do all of the steps involved in producing a broadcast ready tape to go to the cable. So kind of backing into it, logic says you can use it for that purpose. Now, the person that you had for many years, whether he was treated rightly or wrongly by the former mayor, that's really not the point of what our work was. He had the dual title of the studio manager and the emergency manager. Okay, there's nothing in the records that was made available or would tell us how, if at all, his compensation was allocated. All right. So is that the two lines there, $800,000 of expense, is that appropriate being charged that amount to the PEG monies? I don't know. And I don't believe there's any way to really go and answer that question particularly if you go back to 2004, 5, 8, pick the year you want. So would it make logic sense that it probably was not allocated? I guess so. But that is a question that I cannot answer for you, and I don't know that you can. Newsletters, significant amount charged in total for that period of time at $300,000. You know, unless the newsletter was, if you will, promoting or being a TV guide for the PEG, the public access station, I don't think the newsletters were an allowable cost, right? Nice idea, it's communication. Wrong communication has nothing to do with cable, all right? So I would say that the 300,000, it would entirely be inappropriate. Phones, sure, station manager would need to have a phone. Emergency manager would definitely need to have a phone, but that shouldn't be PEG monies. But it works out that the phone charge is like $700 a month when you do all the divisions for the years and the months. I don't think that, even if you had long distance call, does anybody remember a long distance call and have to pay for them? Yes, a few of you do. The picture of the dog, I don't think he remembers. At any rate, that's a pretty hefty number. My guess is it was just, and we saw from many audit reports where there really wasn't any rhyme or reason for how some things were charged or allocated. I'm guessing that was one of them too. Now, what's the right amount? I don't know. It's just, I think there's too much there. Capital outlay, yeah, that's fine. And I think that was part of the issue that so many of you had was, hold it, we needed to spend more money on capital outlay, but it got stonewalled. And again, other is, I don't know what's there, but if you take 68,000 and spread it over 16 years, it's about $4,000 a year. So nothing much to get excited about. So what do you do with those that, like the newsletter, are completely questionable, or those that are in part questionable, phones and the wages and benefits? How much what do you do with it? Well, and here's what should likely happen. If we take the newsletters on one that's fairly obvious, at that $130,000, say that should have not been a charge against the PEG monies. So you need to return that out of the general monies back into the PEG reserve, all right? Some portion of the phones and likely the wages would need to likely be returned also. Can't tell you how much it should be. I mean, I could come up with a wild number just like any of you guys could. What do you do with it? So if the PEG monies go up, my understanding is you are in the process of, or maybe you're already finished in renovating, remodeling the boardroom, which is being called the studio room, and perhaps getting, new equipment. I don't know the extent of that. And I don't know the extent of what you're spending. With the reserve at the end of fiscal 19, so it's changed a little bit since. I didn't go and try to update it, at just short of $1 million. If you're spending more than that, all right, let's say, just to make it absurd, you're spending $2 million on the renovation. Well, that $1 million would definitely absorb all the wages, all the newsletter, and all the phone costs. All right. If you're not likely doing there, but you get where I'm going to. If it's like 1.5 million, 1.4 million, whatever, you could say, okay, well, that will, if you will, you're spending non-PEG monies on that, and therefore it could cover how much that PEG monies approximately could be used. Okay, this is your own honor system, right? There's nothing unless somebody picks this up and I hate to say the PEG police, because I don't know that they exist, that anybody is going to be taking issue with it. Although, certainly a taxpayer or a ratepayer more so could say, well, that's inappropriate. You say, fine, we recognize that, but we have no mechanism to go and do anything else. So if you make a reasonable, good faith effort towards this, then, but lastly with that, if the amount you're spending is lower than that $1 million reserve level, let's say you're spending 500,000. All right. I think you need to, at a minimum, put the newsletter money back in there, which is going to increase the reserve, the net reserve after the money you spend out of it, and probably do something relative to the wages and the phones. All right. So with that, I do want to stop, since that was a major topic. Questions, comments?
Councilman Muscat, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Mr. Kettner, did you get a chance to review some of the statements that Plant Moran put out where the PEG fees were commingled in with transportation and not actually spelled out as PEG fees?
When I went back, excuse me, when I went back to 2004, there's some, probably a few years pre-GASB 34, where the presentation of the reserved fund balance wasn't the same as under the new standards, the then new standards, where it was restricted fund balance. But I could find the numbers either on the face of the statements and or in the notes. So yes, they may have been possibly commingled on the books, but when it came to the presentation in the financial statements, they were separated.
And and the other thing about using the PEG fees for salaries, I believe in August 25th of 2008, and I believe I gave you this memorandum here that the FCC announced that the federal court has affirmed that the FCC decision to limit the use of PEG fees to capital costs incurring in or associated with the construction of PEG access facility. This means that PEG fees may not be used for general municipal spending, or may not even be used for other spending associated with support of the use of PEG access fees, such as salaries and training of the PEG staff. So I think there's letters there that state that they can't be used, but I just want to, be aware that when I first brought this up with the help of a few other people, that those were taken in consideration of asking about the PEG fees.
Now that determination was in 2018, was it not? It wasn't 2008.
It started in 2008 and then came out in 2018 as they reaffirmed it. August, right. Matter of fact, August 20th, 2008. I have the memorandum right here.
Okay, well, from what I look at and what I can recall, I thought it was, something that was more definitive or clear at the latter part of this 16-year period. as I said, 2018.
Well, regardless, it was a lot of money that was used from there that shouldn't have been used. Let's put it that way.
I'm not going to disagree with you that it's still kind of, it's ambiguous. All right.
Yes.
Until it became later in that time period where it became more. Now, you know, here's your numbers on the schedule. If the council feels that it would be the best action to return all those wages, taxes, and benefits to the tune of $800,000, that's your call.
And,
right?
and we can also
I'm just
forgive
telling
that.
you, from what I've looked at, I'm not seeing anything that made it so clear during this whole 16-year period that you could not use those monies.
Okay, thank you.
Aston?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kettner, for appearing and giving us the summary. So the 2.26 million received, that was for over how many years?
16.
16.
From 2004, fiscal 2004 through fiscal 2019.
All right, and if you can say, and this is a pretty specific question, and the newsletter, was the entire newsletter budget for the city newsletter funded by the PEG money?
I don't know the answer to that question.
No, it's not. It's not.
And then was the ad money, did you see that figured in, the money that businesses paid more and more over the years for the ad money?
Didn't see that either.
And the phones being paid for with PEG money of about $700 a month, is that an average taken over the 16 years?
Yeah.
What was the total cost to date for your services? And your firm was hired by attorney Matt Shank, correct?
That is correct.
But what roughly was the total amount charged to date, the total billing from the Rehmann Group?
Is that the invoice you sent me, Mark?
I'm sorry.
That was the invoice you sent me, right? The
Well, I
one for
just sent,
$5,579?
I just sent that. Previous to that, there had been $38,000 billed, of which just short of $20,000 was what I would call the front end work, which included trying to figure out what you guys wanted. So you recall that there were interviews with each of you, as well as some other people, including the former treasurer, the former mayor. And so then the balance of that has been on doing these procedures.
Thank you. And we had talked before, this was not exactly a forensic audit like you were lining up evidence to go to court. You put it, and I think aptly, it was sort of a pre-forensic audit. It was looking over that period to see any misspending. And then if it went forward, let's say this was a private company and something went to court, then you would line up the specific receipts, checks made, and so forth. Is that a fair statement?
It's a fair statement.
And then anything at all about the CSO spending, the millage, and you did not look at that?
That is, well, it's later in the status report. Did you want me to jump up to that or jump
Sure,
around?
go ahead.
Well, we have a couple more questions. Let's take the questions before we move
Let's just
forward.
stick to the pack, please.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to ask Councilman Abdullah. Go ahead, please.
Zohair was first. Go ahead, Zohair.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Dave, please.
So I just had a question for you, Mark. You were talking about all these different fees that have been paid in one way or another, but obviously you realize there was two different opinions on this as far as whether they can be paid towards employment or not. And even yourself, with all the research you've done, you still say, like a lot of them have said over the years, that it's not that clear whether it can be paid towards employees or not. Now, the concern I've always had is the amount of money that we are spending on this, to you, to the law firm, and then everybody's time and effort on money that was spent not to give away to somebody on the outside. In one form or another, it would have been paid by the city, whether through PEG fees or through the general fund. So it's not like there's actual money missing. And whether you can pay from the PEG fees to the employees or not, as you know, there was two different complete opinions on this, and not one of them made it very clear, or between the combination of the two, it wasn't that clear whether you can or can't. My concern with all this has always been that we're going to spin our wheels, spend a lot of money, and at the end, I'm not going to say find nothing, because you're always going to find something. You can find something in my real estate office. You can find something in any organization. But is it worth the amount of money spent on this? That's the concern I've always had. Thank you.
Next, I have Councilman Abdulhak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did go after the PAC with Ray and other people, and we brought it forward. That was one of the items we wanted the auditors to look at. The issue is that we have over $2 million over the years we collected from the residents to create studio, to do something to inform them, to educate them. And the only resolution I found in 16 years was passed to spend money from the PEG to buy cameras or to fix anything to educate our resident was $23,943. That was misuse of money, was for a specific reason, for a specific work. It was not. The man is dead, I understand. But if there is a possibility that some of that money, even from 2018, if I take $700 a month for phones, multiply that by 12, multiply that by 3, you're looking close to probably $40,000 just for phones. We don't know about the letters. We don't know about other things. I think we spent some hundred and some thousand for lawyers to get the mayor to sign the contract with the auditing firm. I think we owe it. We owe it to the residents to really to go in depth and find out what happened, so it does not happen again. This is just talking about the PEG. I have 100 questions about the CSO, about other things, about the pension, about DRAP program, about government pension. But for the PEG, we have enough money to cover what they already charged us. And I think this is just one item. And I'm not going to say there was money stolen or taken away, but I need to know the truth. What was going on in my city where the residents overcharged millions of dollars, millions, illegally, and nobody has paid anything back, or there is no accountability whatsoever. And who was participating in the cover-up? Who was in on it? The previous mayor was not the only one who knew about it. There was other people who participated, and some of them, they might be working still in the city. So I hope my council members, you support me in asking Mr. Kettner to go in depth and find out what's going on with everything in our city, so the new administration can start from clean and we know what happened, and we take the necessary measures so it doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Muscat.
Just, and I want to thank Councilman Abdel Haq. And in response to Councilman Pro Tem Dave Abdullah, I've been involved with city council meetings for many, 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 many years and went to study sessions for many years. And I just kept hearing over and over that we did not have any money at all to fix our studio. Zero money.
I heard that
Okay?
too.
And we heard that for years and years and years.
Correct.
And all of a sudden, when the regime changed a little bit in the emergency manager's office, we found $900,000. So spending money on this type of audit, because I feel that I can't trust the administration. And if you can't trust the people that you're working with, you have to do something. And I know and it's not going to be free, but there goes more than just PEG fees. There's a lot of different things that we were told over the years that just didn't add up. 2 and 2 is always 4. You can't make 5 or 3 out of it. Okay. So when you're constantly told something, you find out later that it's wrong. I lost trust. And unfortunately, previous city councils, okay, always took the person's word that everything is good. And nobody read this stuff. Nobody was educated enough to read it and understand it. Okay, that is the problem. We were all given the paperwork. And if you remember, Councilman, the first words that used to come out of, God rest his soul, Mr. Dan Paletko, was council approved it. Council approved it. So it was council's fault. And in all honesty, it was council's fault because we let it go by. We didn't challenge it.
But
so now the challenge is on. You have to challenge somebody somewhere along the line. And I don't know, had the mayor lived, if he would have ran again and won again, we'd be still stuck with the same thing. No trust in the administration. And that's why I pushed for this forensic audit, because I can't accept something in good faith anymore, because I wasn't told the truth, and you weren't told the truth, and you know that.
Council Chair, may I?
I've got Councilman
Okay, go ahead.
Constant, Councilman Baydoun, and then you could be next.
Go ahead, Councilman Abdullah.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, the only thing I want to say, there was no disagreement that things should be looked into. I never had a problem with that. All I had a problem with is hiring 2 firms, in this case, a law firm and an auditing firm, to do what Plant Moran has been doing all along. And all I said was, let's take it up to another level with them. If we need more information from them, they were giving us audits every year, including this year again. They do this every single year. So if we need more information, we'll pay them a little bit more instead of spending multiple. Right now, my guesstimate, and this is just a guesstimate, between the 2 firms, it's an educated guess, off the top of my head, it's almost about right around $300,000 that we've already spent. I just don't think it's worth it. I think you give 20, maybe 30, maybe $50,000 to Plant Moran and have them take it up another notch or 2. And if we're not satisfied, then we'll go to the next level. And I've been on record saying this for many years, obviously.
And the reason why I wanted a third person audit is for the simple reason I wanted to get the information other than having the audit firm that we have, because let's face it, the administration is only going to give them so much.
Just but like Plant Moran is a third party. But Plant Moran is a third party. Now, if the administration is not giving them information, that's a different conversation. Well, and I know there was, listen.
I didn't want to trust the status quo because I've been lied to.
And Councilman,
I'm being lied to.
I wouldn't deny that there was issues. There was definitely some issues. I agree with you on that.
Being lied to. That's all I can say.
Okay, let's move on. Councilman Constant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to summarize, you did not find any funds missing. Like we had a interim building director years ago who was writing checks to non-existent companies from the building department and cashed them, and he was caught and went to jail. But you did find one way to put it is some big stretches of how PEG money, the cable franchise money, was spent on expenses that the cable money shouldn't have been spent on. Did you find any or do any findings on that the equipment and everything in the cable television studio and so forth was ignored, or like, for example, $700 on phone calls? Did you make any findings or have any thoughts on that issue?
I have no thoughts on that issue because other than talking to your former studio manager and emergency manager who had personal comments on that, and perhaps one of the council people, I did not have access to the information that would give me any kind of clue as to the equipment you use, the condition of it, or anything of that nature. And I can also, you said that I find items that it seems that were not appropriate use of the PEG monies. Yes, that's what I was just talking about. Do I have any indication of monies missing?
We don't know.
That's impossible from where I'm at, the records that I had. You would be better to answer that question than I. All right. I do want to add something with Councilman Muscat was talking about. I just opened up the 2004 audit report, and on page 14, it shows that there is a reserve fund balance for cable improvements. All right. Well, the reason why I mentioned that is the numbers were there. It's just, I don't think you guys knew where to find it. And so then you were told we don't have the money. Well, yeah, you did, but you got to know where to look for it. Enough with that.
I'll put, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Baydun.
Hey, thank you so much, Madam Chair. And Mark, thank you so much. I just had a couple of questions. My first question is, I know you said you were referencing that there is nothing that says where you can take the money out of the PEG or not. There's no PEG police. Can you reference any of that? Do you have anything where you can share with our council and with the body so that we can see that for ourselves?
The FCC.
One of the places that it's at is the 18-page letter that was done by the city's attorney, who references it's limited, all right, on terms of any kind of regulations that are out there. And he does refer to some work that has been done by some other attorney or attorneys that specialize kind of in this area. They're, slight in terms of the references. Councilman Muscat is right. There is reference to the FCC or whatever that was, or FTC, I should say. We I think disagree a little bit on the dates. I thought it was something that was more recent, but no, I mean, you got an attorney sitting there, and sometimes there's volumes on some things, and in other things there's nothing, and this is one of those nothings.
Thank you, Mark. And so my second thing is, and I'm kind of, I'm pulled between both. I understand what Councilman Pro Tem Dave Abdullah is saying. We're spending all this X amount of dollars. Why don't we give a little bit more money to Plant Moran? But then I also understand where Councilman Muscat's coming from. It's like, hey, nobody feels trusted. And having an outside independent, even though Plant Moran is, I understand where he's coming from. Do you feel that we should continue to scope through this?
On the PEG
on
fees
this actual
anything?
audit.
Did I?
He's
Tell
talking
me
about the
again.
audit as a whole, the audit as a whole.
Okay. Number one, and Denise has been the recipient of this many times, a little lecture, don't call it an audit. It wasn't an audit. You talk to a CPA, which I am, and a CPA firm, which Rehmann is, just like Plant. You say an audit, then you're talking about something that occurs in accordance with a certain set of standards. This didn't happen. Okay, and then even the differentiation between a financial statement audit, a federal compliance audit, or a certified fraud examiner's audit, which could be, more in the line of a forensic, those have specific meanings. This is not that, all right?
So if it's not an audit,
And it
then
was
what is
not, and it was not, just let me, you notice I don't use the word review. I'm certainly trying not to, because a review means a certain thing in the context of the CPA. That's why we call it a financial investigation. And it was right early on. I don't know if it was Councilman Constant that may have said that we were doing this investigation and it could lead to a forensic audit. Yes, that is true. And so I am not suggesting, based upon what I've seen, that there is enough smoke that I would suggest that you spend the money to really go and beat it up in a forensic audit. All right.
So
Does
that's
that
your
answer your
recommendation.
question?
That does. Actually, I thank you for that. Thank you, Council Chair. That's all I had.
Abdul-Haq?
Madam Chair, thank you. Mr. Kettner, in one of the city council meetings a few years back, and Mr. Constant was on the council at that time, and Mr. Ray Muscat and Lisa Hicks Clayton, before the new council came in. The mayor stated that when he changed the emergency manager, when he changed the position, he wanted to give it to his assistant, and he moved Bob Ankrat. He stated that his assistant found $890,000 in a PEG account, which he didn't know about. And this is on record. Can you tell me for certain, from what you looked at, that there wasn't any checks under $1,500 might have been written to somebody who didn't exist, and it was cashed and passed without the knowledge of anybody, since it was in the limit of the mayor and under his authority? Can you tell me that
I cannot.
in certain words?
I cannot.
You
Let me
could
tell
not.
you, what I got was, and this is, accounting term, but I got a trial balance,
Okay.
which is simply, here's an account, a revenue account, an expenditure account, and here's its balance for the fiscal year.
But you
Right.
didn't have any
I
detail
did not
from
get,
the ledger.
I
what
asked
was
for
spent.
and did not get a general ledger detail, all
Did
right?
you ask for it?
I'm sorry?
Did you ask for the ledger to see how this money was spent from 2004
I-
up to
I
2000?
asked for general ledger detail and was told that, number one, Plant does not have that, which sounded unusual to me, but that's what they said. And getting
Who
it
told
from the
you that,
city. I mean,
Mr. Kettner?
look, I requested the trial balances in July. All right.
Okay.
I didn't get anything, even those, until March. So I have
In July
learned that
20
when you beat
in
your head
July
against the
2020,
wall so long, it doesn't make sense to do more. So I
Sir,
didn't get it, so I can't tell you. Now, even, let me tell you this, if it was, even with the general ledger detail, and if it was done through payroll, the payroll postings do not have individual names on them. When they're posted into the general ledger, it is usually the date. of the payroll run, right? It's done as a batch. So
it
you'd
could
really
have
need
been,
to then have access to the payroll documents, which I asked if we could get into having read access to the payroll. And the then mayor
refused to give you
said
access, and I
absolutely
remember
not.
that.
What's that?
I was a treasurer, and I remember when you requested it and it was denied. He refused to give you access to it.
Right. And,
And I
you know,
believe-
not that I don't understand, I do, you know, all softwares don't necessarily have a read-only access. I wouldn't give a third party live access to payroll, but I found that unusual. But yeah.
In short, you did find that there was some money misused in the PEG. Let's put it in a simple term. Was there money misused, misallocated for something so they shouldn't done it?
I have, and I've communicated that to you. The newsletter is an example of that.
Okay. Thank you. I will stop at this for the PEG. Let's move on for other things.
Councilman Constant.
Yeah, I did one quick statement just to Councilman Muskett's point and also Mr. Kettner's point. And generally speaking, so years ago, the cable franchise fees, there were different amounts, and the city's got some money for the right of way. There was it was initiated by Andy Dillon just before I got in the legislature, who had the northern part of Dearborn Heights, what we call the AT&T bill, that made reduced all the franchise fees and made them uniform. And there's groups that, mainly the cable TV companies like Comcast, that want less and less franchise fees. And then there's a state group out of a law firm, Kitch Sabier, Promac or something, that wants the cities to be paid more in the right of way. But I agree with Mr. Kettner. There were some significant findings of what might be called improper spending, such as newsletter, $700 for phone bills and things like that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Kettner, with your presentation.
Okay, second area or topic was credit card usage. In September of 20, the mayor, we did speak, and they forwarded 4 years worth of the monthly credit card statements. We were told at that time that there were only 2 credit cards in the city's name. One that was held in the treasurer's office and one that was held by the police chief. Okay, I have no way of knowing, again, because I did not have the general ledger detail to do a search for vendors to see if there was indeed any other cards. But based on what was provided, those 2 cards scanned through there was nothing that suggested that there was unusual activities or they did not pertain to city business. So that was the extent of that. Third area was on the resolution of audit findings. I went through a whole bunch of years of audit reports and the related management letters to see the findings that were included in the single audit reports, as well as in the management letter. Many findings were repeated to the point it was obvious that they weren't trying to do anything to fix them. So it's not illegal. It's just poor management. And from that standpoint, My suggestion to the city is really need to take those serious, take some action to get them addressed and resolved and move on. And because in the end, they're going to help improve your financial management systems and processes. So, but yeah, they were horrendous on not taking care of audit findings.
Not following up on Plant Moran or audit findings and corrections that need to be made is what you're saying, Mr. Kettner?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
We can't hear you, Denise.
Councilman Abdul Haq?
Thank you, Madam Chair, again. Mr. Kettner, do you know how the mayor closed the deficit between 2011 and 2015, which was $5.5 million? And did you find out if he misallocated money and mischarged the residents taxes, overtaxed, over levies to basically close the deficit of $5.5 million between 2011 and 2015? Did he submit any false reports to the Treasury Department of the state?
That wasn't one of the 10 topic areas that we were asked to look at.
Okay.
So answer to your question is no, but it's no because it wasn't looked at by us. Now, I did see, and you know, it was very consistent with what I saw at other governments, is that following the subprime meltdown, your property taxes took a nosedive, and your general fund took a nosedive as well. And then for the most part, I would say my own impression is that things came back. I mean, sometimes when you're in the desperate financial situation, it never happens as quickly as you'd like, but quite frankly, it came back fairly quickly, as you suggest, from how do you get from 2011, 2015, big deficit to be out of it. I wasn't charged with looking at that, but I will say this. I mean, understand that, you know, an audit of the financial statements that's being performed by, I don't care if it was Plant Moran or Rehmann or, you know, the whoop-de-doo, you know, CPA firm. What they need to do is plan and perform their procedures to detect material fraud, okay? I would say coming out of a $5 million general fund deficit in 4 years' time, as well as the required reporting to the state, is an area that would definitely be subject to the audit. Because sometimes you can look at it and say, you know, an audit of the financial statements or audit of federal funds, they look at everything. No, they don't. I can tell you with absolute certainty. No, they don't.
I agree with
But
you.
they do have to look at those items that would have a material effect on the financial statements. And I can tell you for sure that reporting, both in the financial statements and in the state, would be subject to the audit.
Mr. Kettner, and the residents of the city, they approved the Hadley override. They gave the city $3.8 million a year to get out of the deficit. On top of that, we still have charged the residents $6.8 million in CSO money. I really would like you to look at it if my colleagues agree to continue this audit. And I would like you to consider looking at that if we make a decision to basically go through with the rest of the audit.
And that is timely because items 4 and 5 are the Act 345 funds and the CSO the sources and uses of water fund money and CSO bond collection. So I did a multi-year change in what those balances are, reported as fund balance or net position reserves or restrictions. Aside from, for example, like with the 345 monies, that growing from 3 million in 2004 for those annual levies up to 9.9 million. I had, again, no access to any documents. And that kind of fell into, I mentioned before,
Did you ask
did the
for
PEG
it,
stuff.
Mr. Kettner? Did you ask for these documents?
I have, yes, I've asked for schedules on the changes for those. I believe I wrote that in there and I got nothing. So I, on my own, using available information, could chart out, schedule out
You
changes,
didn't-
but
Sorry, you didn't receive any of these documents you requested? Okay, who did you ask? The city council hired you. Did you ask the city council or you went to somebody else?
the requests were of administration, so of the former mayor, and their items requested from the auditors because they would have them in their audit work papers. Now, when we were asking for the trial balances to start with, getting past the initial being ignored, if you will, the litigation that the mayor brought after the various vetoes. It was eventually, and it was sometime after the court case was solved. I'm going to say it was probably November, perhaps late October, but in November, Plant Moran responded that they can't give those trial balances or any of the other work papers, which would include the Act 345 and the CSO. They cannot and will not provide it to me, even though requested by the city council. But they will provide the city council, they'll put those files in a portal and they will send the password to the portal to each one of the city council members. Now, I don't know if you got it or not.
No, we did not.
Nobody went and got into the portal or got it or said, hey, Mr. Kettner, you know, we got these stuff you want. So there was a lot of
Can I ask
dead
you,
air.
please?
And as I said before, then, you know, things were dead. And then, well, speaking of dead, then
Mr. Kettner,
chronology,
Mr.
you know, then, you know, as things happen. So it wasn't until Mayor Bazzi said, hey, what's going on with this thing, that I at least got part of it freed up.
Mr. Kettner, in your opinion, was there anything confidential, not public information you requested and where was denied, or in your opinion, it's all can be FOIA, public records?
Yes.
So it is public record, everything you requested.
Yes, the FOIA route was not pursued.
Okay. So there was no reason for the previous administration not to give you all that information, or Plant Moran not to pass it on. Correct? Am I correct?
I would say you are correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
But correct to the extent of it was clearly demonstrated that there was not a spirit of cooperation.
Kettner, just for the record, I was in the Treasury office when you requested that information. And I was told flatly that the mayor is not the previous mayor was not going to give you any access to that information, just for the record.
Okay, let's go on. Councilman Muscat, I'm going to call on you, and then I'm going to ask that no one else raise their hands till Mr. Kettner is done with his presentation.
I might have raised my hand by accident, Council Chair, and I apologize.
Okay. All right, let's let Mr. Kettner finish completely before there's any more questions, because we're getting too far off what this is really about.
Yeah, okay, so item number 6, city positions and salaries. We did not have access to payroll records, so, we did nothing in that area. Number 7 dealt with legal services payments, and the response there, in fact, that was provided by Matt Shank, who just pretty much, if you guys, brought him back under contract, you must have resolved the issue. So I did nothing in that regard. We did get a little traction from the former mayor in terms of city vehicles, not a gasoline, but at least the city vehicles is a starting point, but informed that the city does not have any record, any list of the vehicles that you own. We were instead suggested that we be given a printout for several years, an annual printout from MMRMA through which you're insured for those vehicles. While it lists, year, make, model, VIN number, that kind of stuff, there was nothing, which was the underlying purpose. We weren't too concerned about somebody off driving around in a fire truck, but more of if there was a vehicle assigned to an individual, then that would next be, okay, we know what they are. Now we can go and figure out what the gasoline usage is or something like that. Well, along the way, question came from one of the city council, and a picture of the license plate and the VIN number of the vehicle being driven by the mayor. So, okay, let's see if those were on the MMRMA list. Wasn't even on the list. So
I was right.
yeah, so we didn't know, okay, where do we go next? And then, well, the holidays came, and then, well, the passing of the mayor, so that kind of eliminated the potential to ask further questions about that. So it's very odd. I had, whether it was uninsured, insured through somebody else, which that doesn't make sense. Just another weird thing, I guess.
I know what it was.
What was it?
Well, I feel when city council had approved for X amount of vehicles for the police department, one was already earmarked for him, and council did not approve him to get a new car. And he took it on that it was a city asset and he could just distribute it wherever he wanted, knowing full well, I don't believe he had enough votes for city council to approve him a new vehicle, but he got one anyway. And he went through the back door, let's put it that way. And again, I say, anytime somebody does stuff like this, puts up red flags, ladies and gentlemen, red flags everywhere. And when you don't give an auditor or someone that was hired to look at things, give them the information required, should send up the real big red flag. And that's what I contend with. And I'm very upset on how this went down. Yes, we paid money, but we paid money. And now I know that my feelings and my intuitions were spot on. Spot on.
I can tell you that it would be highly unlikely in the audit of financial statements that they would have been, unless somebody brought something up, that the financial statement auditors would be looking at getting the plates and looking up the vehicle. Again, that's not material to the financial statement. What's very odd to me, since you brought that up, is, we had the entire listing of all the vehicles insured through MMRMA, right? It's self-insurance, but still it's your insurance. And, I could see the sequence of those, I call them X license plates, because they're like, whatever the number is, 53X, and then 3 numeric digits. So in this case, I could see the numbers before, all right, and I could see the numbers after, but it wasn't on the list. And it wasn't on the list in terms of that vehicle and its VIN number being assigned to the police or something like that. It just plain wasn't on there. So then what would happen if they'd had an accident?
We were lied to. We were plain lied to. Simple
Well,
as
you're
that.
going to be
Okay,
liable.
Councilman.
MMRMA probably wouldn't cover it. So, you've got what you're perceiving as being lied to. You have the other risk management, internal risk management, that you had a vehicle being driven on city business that was not insured. That's not very smart. And you guys ought to do something about that. Okay.
Thank you.
Number 9, questions related to building permits and certificates of occupancy. Nothing done in that area. And then questions about the drop program, specifically asked for, the schedules, any year-end schedule as to who is in the drop program and what the balance is, let alone a change in that. And, everybody was kind of like, I don't know, where's that? What was that? So nothing done with that. I'm assuming it is most likely the actuary that is maintaining these schedules, but I couldn't get an answer on that. And if we don't even know who's preparing them, it's hard to get them.
I'll give them to you.
Councilman Abdul Haq has them.
Oh, okay. Send them.
Oh, I have him. I'll give him to you.
Okay. Mr. Kettner, do you have anything else?
I can't hear you, Councilwoman. Council Chair.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kettner, do you have anything more to present?
Nope, that's it.
At this point, I'll ask council members to limit their questions to what he has presented, because we only had this financial thing in a certain area. We can't go beyond it because he didn't look at anything but what he just listed. Go ahead, Councilman Muscat.
It's not a question, as I want to thank Mr. Kettner for doing what he could do with the resources that was given to him. And that's no different than any other firm, being no matter what firm it is, you can only audit what you're given or looked at with whatever is given to you. So I thank you very kindly, sir, and hope to speak with you again one day.
Thank you.
Mr. Kettner, did you request anything from Mayor Bazey after he became mayor to help you in this?
Yeah, when in March, when he asked what the status of things were, I said, Zippo, I haven't gotten the trial balance. And he went and, I got them. Curiously enough, at that point, unless he got it off a portal from the auditors, it looked like the auditors actually emailed each individual year to him, and he forwarded that email to me. So once I put that together, there were some follow-up questions. There was some request on like who is currently being charged to that function. I hate to call it a department because I don't know that it's really a separate full department, but he referred me to a couple of current employees, and I think at least one of them seemed to rapidly become a former employee. And so, you know, like everything else with this, I got some mixed results, some half-answered questions, and referring to somebody else.
Okay, so you
Not
didn't
from
get
Mayor
everything.
Bozzi, from the people that he suggested to get the answer. So, and then, you know, after I produced that PEG report, as I said before, I mean, asked to, you know, kind of sit on that. And so not wanting to be in the middle, I just,
Right, because my understanding is you originally wanted to give us an update back in April, is that correct?
it was May.
Oh, May, okay. But you were
When I did-
advised not
When I
to.
did the draft of that, so most likely it would have been June-ish, something like that.
And why didn't you give that to us again?
I was requested not to
By,
by Mayor Bozzi.
okay, because council did hire you for this.
I know that, and that became one of those, quite frankly, I felt weird that we were originally brought into this when he was a councilman. Crossed over, is he no longer involved in this investigation relative to really the former administration or not? And so I just sat on my hands rather than make any political waves given that time of the year prior to the primaries. And, you know, you guys, besides a pandemic still going on before and during and after, you guys had all kinds of turnover going on, and it just seemed enough banging of my head and wait for you guys to work it out.
Is there anything that you think that we could still hand over to you that might make a difference in this that you did not receive yet?
You know, I think maybe items 4 and 5, the Act 345 funds and the water and sewer money, in particular the CSO, and the drop program number 10. I understand what people's concerns are for the other items. I just don't think there's anything there that would merit pursuing it to the amount of money it would likely cost to do so.
Gotcha. Okay, and next I have Councilman Abdul Haq.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When you asked Mayor Bazzi, and basically in April, and he asked you to delay it, if I'm correct, did you report this to the people who hired you, the city council, Mr. Kettner?
Nope.
No? Any reason why not, besides not making a wave?
Nope, just what I told you.
Okay. So basically, I would say you fall short of probably following up to tell your client what they hired you for. I'm sorry to say that, but that's my feeling. I would like to basically, there are lots of things more serious than PEG and anything else. Act 345, you didn't get any information on it whatsoever?
No, he didn't.
You didn't get the audit report from the company who audited that fund? Did you read anything in that report?
The
See,
company that
Act
audits,
345 have auditors. They audit that fund every year.
Who were
Did
you
ever
saying,
read
Doug?
it or see it?
Did you see anything for Act 345?
Act 345. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I mean, it's a little hard. You're
I'm
sitting in
going
the
to ask
shadows and
you-
I can't, you're muffled a little bit.
I'm going to
But
ask-
no, I did not get a separate audit report for the 345.
Okay.
That
I'm
the
going to-
monies that are going into that are certainly subject to the financial statement audit that your financial statement auditors do.
Okay. I'm going to ask you something came to probably, I looked at it when I was in the Treasury Department and I looked at the audit report. To my understanding, the police and fire, they have opted out of the social service program. In return, they got the pension and they have a multiplier, which they multiply it by the number of years when they calculate the pension which they should get. Do you know if it is 2.8 or 2.5 that multiplier? I believe it's 2.8 and I believe they are multiplying by 2. I'm sorry, I believe it's supposed to be 2.5 since they opt out from the Social Security program, but they are multiplying by 2.8. Is this something you should be looking at? Because this is basically costing the taxpayers, I believe, some extra money. And if you look at the 0.3 over the years, that is, I believe, could range in the millions of dollars. I would ask my colleagues to look at this and consider giving Mr. Kettner a chance at least to look at it because I believe it is worth it. The DRAP program, I would like you to look at it too, because I believe that their money should not be commingled with the pension. The pension is a law passed and the citizens approved it. The DRAP program is a contract between the city and the police and fire. They should not be commingled. And I believe they should be separated. And I would like you to look at that too, because again, that put the burden on the pension fund in the long run, and that put the burden on our residents too. And I really, at the end, want to thank you very much for the effort you did. My last question is to my colleagues, who bought the car? Who is the person who bought the car, who authorized it and bought the car for the mayor, which we don't know where the funds came from and what happened to that car. My understanding, it's in the police service, but I would like to know where the money came from and who approved it. If that person is still in the city working, he should be or he should be fired. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Kettner. Thank you, my colleagues, for the time you've given me.
I'm seeing no further questions from City Council. I will open it up to public comment before we end this. Since it's a study session, you need to state your name, street, city, and you have 2 minutes. Councilman Constant.
Just a matter of housekeeping. So if we wanted anything further, Mr. Kettner, I believe, then the city council would contract with him directly. We hopefully would not need to contract him through the attorney, but that's not a question maybe he could answer. So that's all.
Thanks. Okay, at this time, seeing no further hands, I'm going to end this study session. Everyone have a good night and good holiday, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Mr. Kettner.
Good night, everybody.
From Lebanon,
Good night.
be safe.